Now, over 200,000 temporary disability grants have been suspended by the South African Social Security Agency, SASSA, because they've lapsed. The agency extended lapsed grants from February to December last year, but continuing to pay them would have cost the agency 1.5 billion rand. Now, affected people, have been urged to report to the nearest SASSA branch. That's, of course, to update and effectively to reapply for these grants. But let's unpack the story now. We're joined by SASSA CEO Tootsie Memela, who joins us via our video line. Good morning, Tootsie. It's great to have you with us here on the show. I think as a start, let's talk about, what's been swirling on news platforms, in media platforms, in regard to these 200,000 suspended grants now. Is it at all, in any part, due to a lack of funds that these 200,000 grants have been suspended?
Definitely not. It's as a result of the fact that these grants are temporary disability grants, which requires an individual that has a temporary grant to come back and reapply so that we can assess as to whether the person's condition still remains, and it's based on medical requirement.
Now, that was the case, that would have been the case last year already when the grants were meant to lapse in February, but they were then at that stage extended.
The minister at the time, due to the issue of COVID, actually took out a directive at the time when all the other COVID grants were put in place for us to be able to extend these until the end of December, and all clients were advised that the grant is going to be extended until the end of the year. And the expectation with all the clients is that when you've received a temporary grant, you need to go for medical assessment with your doctor and come and reapply, which is something that we emphasized from October until December. So the expectation was not a surprise.
So what happens now for those who still feel that they do qualify for the grant? It's basically an application process from the beginning.
Yes, anybody that feels that they still have that disability that they had, or a medical condition that they had previously, they therefore need to come to our offices for an application. But what helps is if they go to their doctor first to make an assessment, so that by the time they come to us, they have already been assessed. We can then go through the process to assess as to whether, with our doctors also, and go through the application process to see as to whether they still qualify.
Given the COVID-19 protocols that are in place, is there a way of doing this application completely online and not going into a SASSA branch?
What we advise is that the clients that do have access to digital platforms, that they can download the application, go to their doctor, and only come to us at the end of the stage. And we've actually made sure that we have sufficient resources in all the different branches so that the clients can be assessed and supported as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And what is the time period that this temporary disability grant application, what's the turnaround time here? I'm just thinking about, if it's come to an end, the people who would depend on this grant to put food on the table, how long would they then wait to renew the grant? I mean, having said that, if I knew the grant was coming to an end in December, would I have applied in September already? Have you seen people applying for that renewal in September already?
Unfortunately, people, I think, had hope because we had extended it twice that we would automatically extend. So not many people actually came through to apply at the time, except only for new clients. But the clients that were in the system didn't come and apply. Hence, we've put teams to make sure that we put a focus on this so that we can deal with all the existing clients or the clients that were there as quickly as we possibly can. And we've put resources to make sure that staff can focus on this particular category of clients. Yeah. And in terms of when it will take for the grant to be approved, it would require the client to actually go for an assessment. And in the meantime, if the client is actually in dire strait, because in some instances you may find that it's people that are not necessarily desperate, but they are temporarily disabled, will then put them through an application for a social relief so that we can tie them over in the meantime whilst they wait for the grant to be approved.
And Tootsie, what is the monetary value of that social relief if it is the case that this client does need help to tide them over until this grant application is processed?
The social relief in terms of what we're going to put in place now would be 700 rands, as different from a temporary disability grant, which sits at 1,700. This is for us to be able to extend the rent, because in terms of the grants, we have different categories. And on social relief, the funding that we have is a limited fund, which does not mean that on ordinary grants, we don't have funding.
Right, right. So in terms of this new round of applications now, this 210,000 disability grants that have been suspended, how long will the grant be valid for until the next renewal period? And I suppose, what is your advice for people who do fall into this category for this temporary disability relief? If it is for a set period of time, do I put a reminder in my calendar to say I need to renew at this stage so that I'm covered throughout? I don't have a single month where I'm not covered.
Normally, you are given the grant upfront, whether it's for 6 months or 12 months. So the person that receives the grant would know upfront as to how long the grant will take, and that it would lapse after the number of months that you've been given. And ordinarily, the client would then come in before the grant lapses if the condition hasn't changed, but they would start first by going to their a doctor for them to be assessed as to whether the condition still remains.
All right, well, thanks very much for your time this morning on the AM Report. It's important to get all of those points clarified there, as those 200,000 grants, those grants for temporary disability, have been suspended. It is now your opportunity to reapply for that grant.